Commander Ilara Voss left the diplomatic chamber with Dr. Chen's findings clutched in her hand. The Concordat delegation had departed hours ago, but their condescending smiles lingered in her memory. She made her way through the orbital station's corridors, nodding to crew members who straightened at her approach. "Tell me again," she said as the laboratory doors closed behind her, in terms even a military grunt like me can understand. Dr. Sophia Chen gestured to the holographic display where human and alien physiological scans rotated side by side. Their environmental tolerances are incredibly narrow. Temperature variations we consider mild would be lethal to them. Radiation levels we work in daily would cause immediate cellular breakdown in Concordat physiology. And they evolved as the dominant species? Voss asked, her brow furrowing. Their worlds are garden paradises, Commander. Stable climates, minimal predators, predictable seasons. Their evolution never required the adaptability that Earth demanded of us. Chen manipulated the display to show Earth's history of extinctions, ice ages, and rapid climate shifts. What we consider normal, adapting to changing circumstances, they consider a biological impossibility. Admiral Winters entered the lab, his weathered face grave. The Concordat vessel just transmitted a massive data packet to their homeworld. We intercepted and decoded portions of it. He placed a data tablet on the workstation. "They're scared of us, Ilara." The screen displayed translated Concordat communications. Human biological samples indicate unprecedented adaptive capabilities. Subjects demonstrate rapid environmental acclimation without genetic manipulation. More concerning, their historical records show voluntary exposure to increasingly dangerous conditions as recreation. Recommend immediate classification as Apex Threat Level 1. Recreation, Chen asked. "They found our sports archives," Winters explained. "Marathon running, free diving, mountain climbing without oxygen. Activities we consider challenging but normal. They view as evidence of a species with terrifying pain tolerance and environmental adaptability." Voss scrolled through the report, stopping at a section marked with urgent priority markers. "They're particularly disturbed by our history of warfare. Most Concordat species evolved with minimal intraspecies conflict," Chen said. "Their wars lasted generations because they couldn't adapt tactics quickly. We developed and abandoned entire military doctrines within single conflicts." An alert chimed on Winter's communicator. "The UN Security Council is assembling. The Concordat has made their first official proposal for humanity's integration into galactic society." The council chamber was filled beyond capacity when Voss arrived. Ambassador Zex Toril stood at the center, his translucent skin now flushed with blue undertones, a sign of stress, according to the hastily distributed xenobiology briefings. "Humanity will be granted Category 3 status," the ambassador announced. "Your species will receive protection, technological guidance, and designated territories for colonization within established boundaries." The Secretary-General leaned forward. "And what does Category 3 entail, exactly?" Zex Toril's inner eyelids flickered. Another stress response. "Category 3 species are considered developing civilizations with promising potential. You would join 17 other species under Concordat guidance." "And Categories 1 and 2?" asked the Chinese representative. "Those classifications are reserved for founding member species and their closest allies," the ambassador replied smoothly. Voss caught Winter's eye across the room. The classification report had listed humans as Apex Threat Level 1. Yet here, they were being officially categorized as a relatively harmless developing species. The Concordat was hiding their true assessment. As the meeting adjourned, Voss intercepted Dr. Chen in the hallway. "They're lying to us," she whispered, preparing something behind diplomatic smiles. Chen nodded. "The question is why? If they truly fear us, why not destroy us immediately?" "Because," Voss said slowly, "they're not certain they can." Dr. Marcus Chen stared at the data crystal in his palm, its surface catching the amber light of Nexus Prime's 3 suns. The Concordat capital's gravity adjusters hummed beneath his feet, keeping the massive city's variable gravitational fields stable for the hundreds of different species that called it home. "You understand what this means?" Trillax asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The blue-skinned diplomat glanced nervously at the door of Chen's quarters. "If they discover I gave you this, I'll be recycled." Chen's eyes widened. "Recycled?" "An unfortunate translation," Trillax replied, rubbing the faded scars on his neck. "Let's say my consciousness would be repurposed for the greater good of the Concordat." Chen inserted the crystal into his terminal. The holographic display filled with species classifications, evolutionary histories, and threat assessments. He quickly found the human entry and froze. "This can't be right," he murmured. "They've placed us in the same category as the Devourers and the Void Claws." He turned to Trillax. "These species are mythological predators, monsters from children's stories." Trillax's expression darkened. "They were quite real, Dr. Chen. Apex predator species that evolved with both intelligence and aggressive expansion instincts. The Concordat eliminated them millennia ago." Chen scrolled through the human assessment, his scientific curiosity overwhelmed by growing alarm. The file contained detailed analyses of human pain tolerance, environmental adaptability, and psychological resilience. There were video clips of extreme sports, survival shows, and military training exercises, all labeled as evidence of biological anomalies inconsistent with evolutionary theory. "Why would they classify us this way?" Chen asked. "We've been nothing but cooperative since first contact." Trillax moved to the window, looking out at the impossible architecture of the Concordat capital. "The Supreme Council doesn't fear what you are, Dr. Chen. They fear what you might become." He pointed to a distant spire that pulsed with energy. "That's the Hall of Prophecy. The Concordat doesn't just study history. They attempt to predict evolutionary trajectories. You're saying they think we'll become like these extinct predator species. Worse." Trillax turned back to the display. "Look at the psychological assessment." Chen found the section and read aloud. "Unlike previous apex threats, humans demonstrate inexplicable empathy toward non-kin groups and even other species. This trait, combined with their adaptability and pack-bonding behavior, presents an unprecedented threat vector. They form alliances that transcend evolutionary logic." Understanding dawned on Chen. "They don't fear us as conquerors. They fear us as liberators." The terminal chimed with an incoming message from Earth. Lieutenant Rodriguez's face appeared, her dark eyes intense. "Dr. Chen, we've confirmed your suspicions. The ceremonial artifacts contained surveillance nanotechnology targeted specifically at monitoring human emotional responses. But there's more." She glanced over her shoulder before continuing. "We ran analyses on the Concordat medical equipment they provided. It's not just for treatment. It's collecting detailed genetic samples and adaptation data." Chen looked at Trillax, whose translucent skin had paled considerably. "Are they looking for weaknesses or strengths?" Chen asked. "Both," Trillax replied. "When the Concordat classifies a species as a potential threat, they develop two parallel programs: containment and weaponization." He pointed to the crystal. "Keep scrolling, Dr. Chen. See what they're really afraid of." Chen swiped through more files until he found one labeled contamination risk. The image showed humans working alongside various alien species, with alarming notations about ideological infection and hierarchical disruption potential. "They're not just afraid we'll fight them," Chen whispered. "They're afraid we'll change them." Admiral Corey Blackwood strode through the corridors of the Earth Embassy on Nexus Prime. Her white uniform, adorned with the newly created United Earth Alliance insignia, contrasted sharply with the organic architecture of the Concordat capital. Security footage of her address to the Supreme Council had spread across the galaxy like wildfire, despite the Concordat's aggressive attempts to contain it. "How bad is it?" she asked as she entered the communications center. Ambassador Rivera looked up from the holographic display, showing real-time updates from a dozen worlds. "Better than expected, actually. 7 species have formally requested alliance negotiations. 5 more have quietly reached out through back channels. And the Concordat response. They've accelerated the quarantine proposal. The council votes tomorrow. Rivera enlarged a portion of the display. But look at these population centers on Mira II and Talax Prime. Protests in support of Earth. They're using your speech as a rallying cry. Blackwood studied the footage of alien crowds displaying human symbols. Some even wore crude replicas of human military uniforms. This wasn't what I intended. Wasn't it? Dr. Chen asked as he entered with Trillax. You challenged their authority in their own chamber. For species that have lived under Concordat rule for centuries. That's revolutionary. The Concordat has called an emergency session, Trillax said, his voice low and urgent. Supreme Leader Ax Geller is invoking ancient protocols. They're deploying the enforcement fleet. Blackwood's expression hardened. Time frame. 28 Earth hours. They'll establish the quarantine perimeter at the edge of your solar system. Blackwood activated her secure communication link. This is Admiral Blackwood. Implement contingency Helios. Authorization Sierra Tango 97 Alpha. She turned to her stunned colleagues. We've been preparing for this possibility since first contact. Every colony world has been stockpiling supplies and accelerating self-sufficiency programs. Will you fight? Trillax asked, his large eyes blinking rapidly. Not directly. Not yet. Blackwood pulled up a tactical display of the solar system. We've developed a series of automated defense platforms based on reverse-engineered Concordat technology. They won't stop a determined assault, but they'll make any attack costly. Rivera looked horrified. You've been planning for war this entire time. I've been planning for survival, Blackwood corrected. There's a difference. On the main screen, an incoming transmission from Mars colony flashed. Chief Engineer Patel's face appeared, the red Martian landscape visible through the habitat dome behind him. Admiral, the Concordat inspection team just departed. They seemed disturbed by our progress. Explain, Blackwood ordered. We showed them the new environmental adaptation chambers. Patel's face broke into a grin. The radiation levels in the testing area exceed Concordat safety protocols by a factor of 30. When they insisted our workers would die, we brought in Gamma Team. Those engineers have been working in those conditions for 6 months. Chen leaned forward. Any signs of adaptation? Cellular regeneration is 15% faster than baseline. Their bodies have adjusted to radiation levels that the Concordat considers immediately lethal. Patil lowered his voice. One of the inspectors actually vomited when we explained that some of the team volunteers for extra shifts. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Finally, Trillax spoke, his voice trembling slightly. In Concordat history, only the Devourers demonstrated accelerated adaptation to environmental hazards. It took them centuries to evolve such traits naturally. He looked at Blackwood with new understanding. You're not just refusing their protection. You're becoming something they've never encountered. Not becoming, Blackwood corrected. We've always been this way, pushing boundaries, adapting to impossible conditions, thriving where we should perish. She turned to face the window, looking out at the alien cityscape. The quarantine isn't about protecting Earth from the galaxy. It's about protecting the galaxy from Earth. Sarah Takahashi stood among the ruins of Agricultural Dome 3 on Rigel IV, the acrid smell of medical decontamination chemicals stinging her nostrils. Through her hazard suit's visor, she could see the memorial wall where colonists had projected images of the 4,732 victims. Her brother Kenji's photo smiled down at her, forever frozen at 26 years old. This area is restricted to investigation personnel, a stern voice said behind her. Sarah turned to face Kayvon, the Concordat security officer assigned to the investigation. His gray skin and rigid posture spoke of military training, but his eyes, 3 of them arranged in a triangle, showed something unexpected. Compassion. I am investigation personnel, Sarah replied, holding up her civilian consultant badge. Biotechnology specialist. Kvaan's third eye narrowed. Your credentials indicate you were a hydroponics engineer. My brother was lead geneticist for the modified wheat program. She met his gaze steadily. I assisted with his research for 5 years. I know these systems better than anyone still alive. Kvaan seemed about to object, then simply nodded. The pathogen dispersal pattern appears deliberate, too efficient to be accidental contamination. Sarah activated her data pad and displayed the molecular scans she'd taken earlier. The pathogen targets a specific protein sequence found only in human lung tissue. It calcifies cellular structures within minutes of exposure. She swiped to a new image. But look at these markers in the protein code. Synthetic attachment points designed for specific delivery mechanisms. Kvaan leaned closer, his third eye widening. How did you identify these so quickly? Our labs are still running preliminary analyses. I recognized the base structure. Sarah's voice hardened. It's derived from a fungal pathogen native to Kepler 186f, but the modification patterns are familiar. My brother received research grants to study similar molecular structures 6 months ago. The funding came through Concordat scientific exchange programs. Kvaan went still. You're suggesting. I'm not suggesting anything yet. Sarah moved to a sealed container and removed a sample tube. But I need access to a quantum sequencer to confirm my suspicions. The only sequencer on this colony was destroyed in the attack. There's one in the Concordat medical facility in orbit, Sarah countered. Your credentials can get us access. Kvaan's posture shifted subtly. What you're proposing violates multiple security protocols. 4,732 people suffocated while their lungs turned to stone, Sarah said quietly. Including my brother. Protocols can wait. 12 hours later, they stood in the deserted Concordat laboratory, watching the sequencer analyze the pathogen sample. This doesn't make sense, Kvaan muttered as the results appeared. These molecular signatures match our military bioweapons division, but the deployment authorization codes are classified above my clearance level. Sarah wasn't listening. She had accessed a separate terminal and was staring at security footage that showed humans in isolated medical chambers, humans who should have died from pathogen exposure, but were instead showing signs of adaptation. Kvaan, she whispered, look at this. The footage showed medical officers observing patients through observation windows. One patient, a young woman not much older than Sarah, was breathing normally despite lung scans showing significant calcification. Impossible, Kvaan breathed. The pathogen is designed to be 100% lethal to human physiology. Apparently humans didn't get that memo. Sarah accessed more files, finding reports with headlines like accelerated adaptation rate, 8,700% above predicted models, and genetic plasticity exceeds all known parameters. An alarm suddenly blared through the facility. Security breach detected. Unauthorized access to classified files. Containment protocols initiated. Kvaan grabbed Sarah's arm. We need to leave. Now. Not without the evidence. Sarah quickly transferred the files to her encrypted data chip. The Concordat didn't just create this pathogen. They're studying how we overcome it. They're using this attack to test human adaptability. As they ran toward the shuttle bay, Sarah realized with terrible clarity that the tragedy hadn't just been an attack, it had been an experiment. And humanity's response was something that terrified the Concordat more than any weapon could. Admiral Voss studied the holographic battle simulations floating above the Coalition war room table on Europa. Representatives from 7 species watched intently as miniature ships danced through projected assault patterns. The Concordat fleet approaching Ganymede outguns us 5-1, she explained, highlighting the massive enemy capital ships. They expect us to either surrender or attempt a direct confrontation. Zenta, the insectoid representative from Proxima Centauri, clicked her mandibles nervously. Our vessels cannot withstand their firepower. The Concordat planetary bombardment of our third colony still haunts our dreams. We don't intend to match their firepower, Voss replied with a thin smile. We're going to use their expectations against them. She gestured, and the simulation changed. The coalition ships, previously arranged in conventional defense formations, scattered into seemingly chaotic patterns. Humans call this swarming, she explained. It's inspired by Earth insects that overwhelm larger predators through unpredictable collective movement. Suicide tactics, rumbled Keylor, the massive reptilian envoy. My people attempted similar strategies centuries ago. The Concordat algorithms adapted within minutes. Their algorithms are designed to predict rational behavior, countered Captain Maya Patel, recently arrived from Mars colony. Her skin had the coppery tint characteristic of long-term Martian residents who had adapted to the radiation. But what if we don't behave rationally, at least not by their standards? She activated her personal terminal, projecting footage of ancient Earth aircraft performing maneuvers that made several delegates gasp. These are historical recordings of something humans called barnstorming, she explained. Pilots deliberately flying in ways that pushed both machines and bodies to their limits. The Concordat considers such behavior pathological, but we've built it into our training programs. Your pilots will die, Senta stated flatly. Some will, Voss acknowledged, her expression solemn. But the Concordat fleet depends on predictive targeting. Their weapons are designed to hit where a rational pilot would fly to avoid death. Our pilots will fly directly toward danger, veering away only at the last microsecond. The gathered representatives fell silent, processing the implications. Finally, Ambassador Turan of the Lyran Collective spoke. We have analyzed the Concordat fleet commander's previous engagements. Admiral Vexcor has never faced a human opponent. His tactical parameters prioritize preservation of capital ships above all else. Exactly. Voss nodded appreciatively. We won't target their weapons or engines initially. We'll aim for their defensive systems in patterns that appear random, but will gradually force their ships to fire on each other as they attempt to target us. She closed the simulation and looked each representative in the eye, her gaze steady. I won't lie to you. This is a desperate gamble, but remember what brings us together. We all suffer under Concordat dominance. They categorize, they classify, they contain. They see diversity as something to be managed rather than celebrated. Kalord's scales rippled with emotion. My ancestors were categorized as limited intelligence laborers because we communicate partially through color patterns they couldn't perceive. Generations lived and died in mining colonies. Similar murmurs of agreement rose from around the table. Stories of Concordat oppression, of species relegated to servitude based on arbitrary classifications, of cultural treasures destroyed because they didn't fit Concordat aesthetics. This battle isn't just about human freedom, Voss continued, her voice quiet but intense. It's about creating a galaxy where adaptation and difference are strengths, not threats to be contained. Where evolution follows its own path, not Concordat-approved trajectories. She activated the final simulation, showing a scenario where coalition forces prevailed against impossible odds. We've prepared for something the Concordat cannot imagine. We've prepared to rescue their crews even as we destroy their ships. When we win this battle, we won't just defeat them. Her eyes gleamed with determination. We'll confuse them. Dr. Chen watched from the observation deck as Tilaran, the Lyran philosopher, underwent the neurological scanning procedure. Her silver-scaled skin reflected the soft blue light of the laboratory as human and alien scientists monitored the equipment. The comparative brain studies were my idea. Tilaran explained as technicians adjusted the sensors around her cranial ridges. My species possesses perfect recall, what you would call photographic memory, but we struggle with hypothetical scenarios. Chen nodded, making notes on his datapad. The laboratory, established on the neutral trading station orbiting Proxima Centauri, had become the galaxy's premier center for cross-species psychological research. The team had gathered neuroscientists, evolutionary biologists, and consciousness researchers from 12 different species. The breakthrough came during a recreational period. T-Laren continued. I observed 2 human children playing with simple blocks. They were engaged in something called pretending. Imaginative play, Chen clarified. Standard developmental behavior. There is nothing standard about it, Doctor. T-Laren's multifaceted eyes widened. These children were constructing elaborate scenarios involving events that had never occurred, creatures that do not exist, and technologies beyond their understanding. When I asked why they engaged in this seemingly pointless activity, they looked at me as if I were the strange one. The neural imaging activated, displaying T-Laren's brain patterns alongside those of the human volunteer. The differences were immediately apparent even to non-specialists. Remarkable, whispered Dr. Kavan, who had defected from the Concordat after helping Sarah Takahashi escape. The human brain literally has additional neural pathways dedicated to hypothetical processing. Dr. Chen enlarged the scan results, highlighting specific regions. It's an evolutionary adaptation from our time as prey species. We developed the ability to imagine threats before they materialized, to ask what if and prepare accordingly. But you didn't stop with threats, T-Laren noted. You imagined better futures, impossible technologies, societies that had never existed. You created art depicting events that never occurred and emotions you'd never experienced. The research team gathered around as more comparative scans appeared. Species after species showed similar patterns. Most lacked the dense network of hypothetical processing centers that characterized human brains. The Concordat leadership species showed the least development in these areas, Kavan pointed out. Their evolutionary history as apex predators never required imagining alternative scenarios. Their success was built on pattern recognition and extrapolation from known data. Chen completed the final adjustments to the research paper they'd spent months preparing. Its title glowed on the main display. Evolutionary Imagination: The Human Capacity for Hypothetical Thinking as an Adaptive Advantage. Are you certain you wish to publish this? Asked Farrell, a gelatinous mathematician from the Ta City system. The Concordat will consider it provocative. They already fear us, Chen replied. Better they understand why. The paper's conclusion appeared on screen as Chen authorized its transmission to scientific networks across the galaxy. The human capacity to imagine what has never been, to conceptualize alternatives to current reality, represents not merely a cognitive curiosity, but a profound evolutionary advantage. This ability enables humans to prepare for threats that do not yet exist, to create solutions to problems not yet encountered, and to form social bonds based on shared hypothetical futures rather than merely shared experiences. While other species excel at adapting to existing conditions, humans excel at imagining, and then creating new conditions entirely. The Concordat's attempt to classify and contain humanity fails to recognize a fundamental truth. You cannot predict the behavior of a species whose primary evolutionary advantage is the ability to imagine the unpredictable. As the paper transmitted, alerts began sounding across the station. Long-range sensors detected massive energy signatures heading toward Coalition space. The Starforge deployment has begun, Kavan said grimly. Supreme Leader Ax Geller must have received an early copy of our findings. Chen stared at the emergency reports flooding the screens. He's not just trying to contain humanity anymore. He's trying to eradicate us before we can imagine our way out of his trap. Admiral Voss stood on the bridge of the Coalition flagship Defiance, watching the tactical display as the Starforge's energy signature grew more ominous by the hour. The massive Concordat installation, positioned near New Terra's sun, was already initiating the stellar acceleration sequence that would trigger a supernova within 48 hours. Status report, she ordered, her voice steady despite the weight of 8 billion lives resting on her decisions. Coalition fleet is in position, Admiral, Commander Rodriguez reported. All ships report ready for hyperspace jump on your command. Voss surveyed the bridge crew, humans working alongside representatives from 7 allied species. Their faces showed determination tinged with the appropriate fear of what they were about to attempt. No sane being would consider a direct assault on the most heavily defended Concordat installation ever built. Open shipwide channel, Voss ordered. When the communications officer nodded, she spoke clearly. This is Admiral Voss to all Coalition forces. You've all studied the mission parameters. You know the odds. I won't insult your intelligence by pretending this isn't what humans might call a long shot. She paused, surveying the faces on the bridge and imagining similar scenes playing out across 73 vessels. The Concordat believes they understand us. They've studied our biology, our history, our psychology. They think they can predict our actions based on probability matrices and behavioral algorithms. Today, we prove them wrong. Voss activated the tactical display, highlighting the Starforge's defensive perimeter. They expect either a conventional assault or a retreat. Instead, we're going to show them something uniquely human, controlled chaos. Battle Plan Prometheus is now in effect. Throughout the fleet, pilots and crew reviewed the unorthodox attack patterns that had been meticulously planned yet deliberately designed to appear random. The holographic battle simulations had been run thousands of times, with each iteration incorporating unpredictable human-influenced variables that Concordat systems would struggle to analyze. All ships, prepare for hyperspace jump on my mark, Voss commanded. 3, 2, 1. Execute. The Coalition fleet vanished into hyperspace, reappearing moments later scattered across 12 entry points around the Starforge. Immediately, Concordat defense systems activated, filling space with energy beams and guided projectiles. Instead of evasive maneuvers, the Coalition ships accelerated directly toward the weapons platforms. At the last possible moment, they veered away, causing the automated targeting systems to adjust and inadvertently strike other Concordat defenses. They're adapting faster than expected, Rodriguez reported as a Coalition frigate exploded under concentrated fire. Implement Phase 2, Voss ordered grimly. Throughout the battle zone, Coalition ships began projecting holographic duplicates, creating the impression of a fleet 3 times its actual size. Meanwhile, drone ships deliberately sacrificed themselves to create debris fields that confused Concordat sensors. On the Concordat command vessel, Supreme Leader Ax Jeller watched with growing rage as his supposedly impenetrable defenses crumbled under an assault that defied strategic logic. Establish direct communication with their flagship, he ordered. When Admiral Voss's face appeared on his view screen, Ax Jeller didn't bother with diplomatic pretense. Your tactics are suicidal, Admiral. You've lost 17 vessels already. Surrender now, and I will consider sparing Earth itself when the new Terra star ignites. Voss's expression remained impassive. You're still thinking like a Concordat, Supreme Leader. You assume we're calculating acceptable losses against potential gains. She leaned forward. But that's not how humans approach extinction-level threats. We don't accept them at all. As she spoke, Ax Jeller's tactical officer reported with alarm that the human flagship had somehow penetrated the inner defense perimeter and was approaching the Starforge's control hub. You have one chance, Ax Jeller, Voss continued. Deactivate the Starforge and withdraw your forces. The Supreme Leader's translucent skin flushed with anger. You would rather see both our civilizations destroyed than accept Concordat authority. This is madness. No, Voss replied calmly. This is humanity. The Galactic Commons headquarters on Centauri III bustled with activity 5 years after the Battle of the Starforge. The once imposing Concordat architecture had been redesigned, its rigid symmetry softened by contributions from dozens of species. Gardens spiraled up previously stark towers, and open forums replaced hierarchical assembly chambers. Ambassador Sarah Takahashi stood at the center of the Grand Forum, the scars on her face a testament to her survival of the Rigelian attack. Representatives from nearly 100 worlds fell silent as she activated the central projection system. The intergalactic vessels have changed course, she announced, displaying the long-range sensor data. They've begun accelerating away from our galaxy at maximum speed. Murmurs spread through the assembly as the significance registered. The mysterious armada that had approached from beyond the galactic rim, believed to be an invasion force, was retreating without engaging. "We've decoded portions of their internal communications," Sarah continued, signaling her technical team. "I believe you should hear this directly." The translation played through the chamber's acoustics. Abort mission immediately. Target galaxy dominated by Deathworld species designated humans. Intelligence reports indicate these beings intentionally crashed ships into our advanced scouts rather than surrender. Survivors report humans rescued enemy crew while continuing to destroy their vessels. Such behavior defies strategic logic and indicates psychological patterns we cannot predict. Recommend immediate withdrawal and establishment of buffer zone, spanning at least 200 light years. Asterisk. When the recording ended, the forum erupted in conversation. Sarah raised her hand for quiet. This marks the third potential invasion force to retreat after learning about humanity's presence, she noted. We appear to have developed quite a reputation. Trillax, now serving as the representative of his formerly subjugated species, approached Sarah as the formal session concluded. "My xenorchaeologists have made a discovery you should see," he said, leading her to a private viewing room, where an ancient artifact rested in a preservation field. This was recovered from ruins dating back approximately 15,000 years, he explained. When we finally deciphered the text, we were surprised. Sarah studied the artifact, a metallic tablet covered in what appeared to be early Concordat script. "What does it say?" "It's a warning," Trillax replied, activating the translation. Apparently, the ancient Concordat encountered humans long before official first contact. The translated text appeared above the artifact. Asterisk. "Beware the soft-skinned bipeds of the third planet. They welcomed our damaged vessel, healed our wounded, and offered friendship without demanding submission. When raiders attacked their settlement, these creatures, barely evolved beyond their primitive origins, sacrificed themselves to protect our crew members, whom they had known for mere days. They lack natural weapons, yet fight with the determination of cornered predators. They die readily for abstract concepts. They intentionally expose themselves to poisons until they become immune. They domesticate natural enemies and treat them as kin. Avoid their region of space at all costs, for they are few in number but boundless in determination." Asterisk. Sarah stared at the tablet, then at Trillax. "The Concordat knew about us all along." "Not the modern Concordat," he clarified. "This knowledge was lost during the Great Schism, but it seems the fear of humans is deeply embedded in our collective memory." As they returned to the main concourse, a group of children from various species ran past, playing an elaborate game. A human child led the group, explaining invented rules that seemed to change by the moment. The alien children followed enthusiastically, adapting to each creative shift with delight. "Perhaps that's what truly makes humans terrifying," Sarah mused, watching the children play. "Not our adaptability or resilience, but our ability to make others adapt alongside us." Trillax's expression softened. "Is that what you call terrifying? My people would call it liberation." High above, in the observation deck, Admiral Voss, now retired, watched the proceedings with Dr. Chen. The starscape beyond the viewport showed thousands of ships arriving for the annual Galactic Commons Summit. "Did you ever imagine this outcome when you classified us as an extinction-level threat?" Chen asked. "No," Voss admitted. "I expected either conquest or annihilation, the historical pattern of apex species. Instead, you created something entirely new." Chen smiled. "That's the thing about humans. We're at our best when we're imagining alternatives to the expected path." "And that," Voss replied, "is why you are both the most feared and most beloved species in the galaxy."